Welcome to The Straight Dope, where you hear the real talk about Iowa Vice.
Hey, welcome to the latest episode of The Straight Dope. We've got a really special guest today, Lacie with Your CBD Store. Lacie, good afternoon. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Weather's good. I'm good. It's Friday.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming over today to talk all things hemp. You've got one of the more unique background stories of the guests we've had on this show, and you know what? And I've told people that when they write the history about consumable hemp in Central Iowa, that you're going to feature prominently in that. And I think that when people hear your story from kind of where we met maybe in 2019 up to the present, I think that they'll understand that you've seen it all. You've been involved in a lot of stuff, and so maybe for people that may not be familiar with say your CBD store or like the SunMed product line, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Yeah, so I've been with SunMed, or your CBD store, since the beginning. The CEO of that company, I actually grew up with them, so I knew them personally, which was important to me being a franchise. And they really capitalize on really salt to the earth products using, monk fruit in lieu of stevia, and using just different natural good things. So high quality hemp, and that's always been my lane. So they've supported me heavily all through every fight, and there have been many, many fights that I've had to endure through this. So they've been wonderful to me. So, yeah.
And people may be familiar with, say, the Ankeny location or the West Des Moines location, but maybe tell us about like the reach that you have across the state of Iowa and what your businesses look like.
Yeah, so as a whole, SunMed has 13 SunMed stores in the state. So I own 4. That's Waukee, Ames, Ankeny, Valley Junction, and then there's an Urbandale location as well. Because of some law changes, I had to close down Waukee, and it's a struggle since the new law, but I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the new regulations, but 4 locations across the state. But SunMed has a pretty decent footprint, it sounds like. And is it like river to river, like you serve all the the major
so
communities?
We've got Davenport, Iowa City, Quad Cities, right, Sioux Falls to Sioux City. I mean, and of course, Central, Des Moines. So yeah, we're all over the map a little. We could always use some expansion, but we've got to have a little bit more support when it comes to products, and then we can maybe expand on that.
You talked about high quality hemp. The bulk of your CBD store line is hemp-derived THC products.
Yeah, hemp-derived products. So, some have THC, some we extract the THC out of for people that are in the military or don't want THC or can't have THC. So we do offer both with and without THC.
And let's go back a little bit to, say, 2018. So a lot of your business can kind of rely on the 2018 Farm Bill, the passage of federal law that legalized hemp-derived THC for the first time.
Correct.
And so if we go back to what your business looked like in 2018, 2019, let's talk about that. You have a couple of franchises locally here. I think it was Valley Junction or West Des Moines and Ankeny.
So the first location was Urbandale.
That's right.
So the Farm Bill was signed into law December of 2018, I believe. And I kind of rolled the dice in assuming it would pass, because it was up in the air on if it would or wouldn't go into effect. So I'd already had a space and inventory and was ready to go. So right as that was signed into law at the end of 2018, I opened right up in January 2019, being the first CBD store. So what that prompted the state to do was they had to respond then to the federal law. So they had one here. They were like, uh-oh, we have one here. What do we do? So it was actually heavily bipartisan supported in the beginning. So when I opened, I I did my due diligence, as you know, talked to all the police chiefs and the mayors and city councils and made sure that I wasn't violating anything. And everyone said, no, you're fine as long as you're under that 0.3% THC, which has been and still is a federal threshold for THC. So I only carried what's called broad spectrum products. So you may be familiar with the terms broad spectrum and full spectrum. The only difference between the two is THC and no THC. So a full spectrum product means that it is every cannabinoid or part that's in a cannabis plant is present. Broad spectrum means all of the parts are intact besides THC, which is taken out. The rest remain. So we're talking a very small difference, but the difference being THC, which we know and some love, right? So I only carried broad spectrum just to play it safe because I knew it was going to be controversial here in Iowa. And so I opened 3 stores very fast. Urbandale was January, Valley Junction was May, Ankeny was October. And then I got arrested in December. And that's when Colin and I had met one another.
And so just to be clear, the products, this full spectrum and the broad spectrum, these are products that are derived from hemp, not marijuana.
Correct.
And that the products that you started out with were broad spectrum products that wouldn't have any Delta-9 THC in.
Correct.
Okay.
No deltas at all. Delta-8, Delta-9, 10, any of them weren't present. So, obviously, eventually we had labs that we could see. So when you spoke to that, well, how she has these felony charges for marijuana, but she's selling legal hemp without THC. So when we pushed in court, if you recall, to say how much THC, they're like, well, there was no THC. So then we'd say, well, dismiss this is ridiculous, it's not marijuana. I remember there was a drug expert that was being deposed, and he said, well, this is a special strain of marijuana. It's THC-free strain marijuana. And I remember you and Bobby had told me, don't react. Don't let your face move. And I'm like, I don't know how. How am I going to do that? How am I going to not react to some stupid statement like that? But as you know, our whole case was riddled with stupid statements. So.
And we're going to get into a little bit of those details, but want to let people know that when you were arrested in the what led up to that arrest, task force actually came into your store and purchased product that contained no Delta-9 THC.
Correct.
But was essentially had some cannabinoids that were derived from hemp and had those products tested. I think maybe had even come back for a second
Yeah, I remember the
undercover
items they
buy
got.
of an over-the-counter
Called your CBD store. They're like, what do you sell here? Oh, I don't know. Take a guess.
CBD.
Yeah.
And based on those 2 undercover purchases and then the lab tests that you hinted at, you were charged with felonies in Polk County. So felony, possession with intent to deliver marijuana, tax stamps.
Possession.
They seized bank records. They seized bank accounts with money.
Yep.
Shut your businesses down. And you had been opened up for a few months.
Ankeny had been open for 2 months. Of course, Valley Junction and Urbandale. I mean, I hadn't made it a year. I opened January 2019. I got arrested December 2019. So I had been in business for almost a year, but not quite a year. So imagine, I had pictures with the mayor of Urbandale and Brad Zahn, who wrote the hemp laws at my store, supported me, had told me, yeah, you're doing the right thing. We're supportive of these kind of stores. These are great. And then I have a SWAT team come in and arrest me, charge me with 4 felonies for selling the same exact thing. So, yeah.
And that, no one else, there were other vendors at the time, health food stores, or there were other retailers, but no one else had been charged. Maybe they had been sent cease and desist letters or told to remove product and things like that. But you stand alone among that group because you ended up facing criminal charges as a result of that. Defended those charges, and we played a role in that. But eventually, those charges were dismissed.
Correct.
And what was interesting about it, from the viewer standpoint, is that at this time, if we fast forward several months, the state had its own hemp plan approved. And so the very products that you were being charged with trafficking were now legal to sell under state law, legal to consume, legal to purchase, legal to drive with, all of that. And so it put, I think, the state in a difficult position that they were charging you with possession of CBD, but now you could legally sell the CBD. And so the timing worked out really, really well for you. And so charges end up getting dismissed. And then, so now the stores are up and running. Are you increasing your footprint, or is the business, are you adding more franchises, more locations at that point?
So when I was arrested, December 4th, 2019, my business was shut down. So although I bailed out of jail pretty much immediately, I couldn't reopen my store, and all my bank accounts were frozen. So personal accounts, business accounts, I had no access to my money nor a way to make money. So
and the
that
inventory had been seized
inventory
too.
had
Yep,
been
that's
seized.
right.
Yep. So I at the time had 3 children and a mortgage, like most people, rent at my retail spaces, and so
Leases, long-term leases, yeah.
long-term leases. So I had to work 6 jobs for 2 years. So my stores ended up being closed down for 2 years, which is crazy because at the time when my stores were closed, every other retail franchise and small shop opened up while mine were shut down. So I'm in the corner saying, Colin, how the fuck is this happening?
Right.
And, the arresting officer in my situation did not want to arrest me. He was very clear about that. He said, I think this is a waste of time, resources, money. I'm so sorry. I have to arrest you. But he was great about giving me details into things. So I know he didn't have to, but he did, and I'm grateful for that. But what it was, so the reason that all these other stores were able to open was simply because they can't afford to arrest everybody and do all the things they did to me, the undercover buys and all the things. So they just said, I remember the example he gave me. He said, we could catch 4 people on a street corner selling cocaine, and we don't have to arrest them all. We can just arrest one of them and let the other 3 go. There's nothing that says we legally have to arrest all of you. So what happens in your case will set the standard for your industry. So I'm thinking, how is that fair? Obviously. I can't open my store, but I could go downtown or to a different retailer and buy something that has THC in it because they're protected by the Farm Bill, and they're protected by even Iowa's Hemp Act that said you could have THC. I just remained very vanilla because I wanted to really put consumable hemp in a health and wellness space, and I didn't want it to be muddied up with high THC, tie-dye type of stigma that it's kind of always been wrapped up in. So, people ask me a lot, do you think there was a reason they chose you out of the people they could have chosen? And of course there is, So in my opinion, and kind of looking on the outside, I was the easiest target. 1, I was the first. 2, I was the only female mother. So in my eyes, I think that they thought I would be terrified being a mother, being
Under
a
pressure,
female,
you'd
under
have
pressure,
different- yeah.
and I would take a plea right away. I would criminalize what I did, but I wouldn't serve time, and they could just kind of wipe their hands from it. Obviously, that isn't how this played out. They didn't know who the fuck they were dealing with, right? So, so it ended up being a very long-term fight that it would just like drug on. They were really dragging their feet, I remember, and that's why it took so long. They thought I'd run out of money, I'd run out of resources to be able to continue the fight, I think. So it's unfortunate, but I think that is what the plan happened to be. And, I'm glad. At the end of the day, I'm glad it was me. I think I am a brave person, and I'm thankful for it now.
And you had support from the corporate entity.
Yep. So SunMed had my back. They paid my legal fees, which they didn't have to do. So I'm very grateful, and I think it sets a really good standard for them as a brand also, because now we have some federal lawsuits and some other things that they've also jumped in with me in support in that way. So
Definitely.
being a national retailer saying, hey, the Midwest matters to us, Iowa matters to us, in the scope of the United States, who gives a shit about Iowa? But SunMed does, and they understand that there's a need all over the nation for this, and so kudos to them in lots of ways.
That's fantastic. And I know that, so as we move forward, 2021, 2022, business is going all right. I mean, you're opening up some different locations. SunMed's expanding the product line. You're adding new things. Now let's come into maybe more recently, 2023, 2024. There's a little bit of a change in the approach that the state is taking in terms of what kind of products they are going to allow. And it's one of the things about consumable hemp is when you make it legal, now you come under the reach of the state, that it's a heavily regulated industry. You're dealing with inspections, and you've got to submit products for approval. I mean, there's this whole regulatory layer to it, which, having worked with you and having seen how other retailers deal with that, it seems to be it's a system that works well. I think up until maybe recently, it was easy to submit products. It was easy to get them approved. The turnaround time wasn't too excessive. They weren't really fighting a lot on new products. When you're submitting something, you could say, it's here, it's manufactured by SunMed, it's been approved in all these other states. I mean, you've got the product name standing behind you. But then things started to change more recently, where there was, the state is starting to clamp down on what would be allowed as a consumable hemp product. And so maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what were the changes in the regulations that were concerning to you as a retailer.
Yeah. Initially, when there was a portal for us to say, hey, these are the products that we sell, we submit them, they're approved, it was pretty easy at that time. This is when our state law was at a 0.03% THC content by dry weight mass. So we've all heard THC is legal 0.03%. That's common, but many people don't know what that actually means. Because most of the THC we deal with is in milligrams. So what does 0.3 percentage by dry weight mass equal in a milligram setting? It's more complicated than it presents. So at the beginning, as long as it was under 0.3, which most products are, they were approved. Then the issue became people selling things that obviously weren't on their approved list. Mostly vapes or inhalable forms of THC, and even CBD. Like they kind of put the kibosh on inhalable, even CBD back in 2021, I believe that came into effect. Smokable hemp, yeah. So we haven't been able to sell smokable hemp for many years, but people still do. And in fact, on my way here today, I was sent a story that 2 people were arrested today in Storm Lake, Iowa, for carrying illegal consumable hemp products. And it talks about inhalables.
These are retailers?
Retailer.
Okay.
It was the vape shop. Shocking. So the issue became there was no enforcement. So we had these laws. We had made it pretty clear, hey, this is what you can sell. This is what you can't sell. The issue then became the police and DHS, or the DIA, who first was in control of this, never enforced anything on anyone. So as much as I could point to places that were selling things we weren't supposed to sell, there was no enforcement. There was no one saying, hey, you're going to get arrested if you're caught again, or hey, we're coming in and taking it, or you're getting arrested. So from someone who got arrested from something with no THC, who wasn't violating rules, it's probably more maddening to me than it is your normal societal person. But now there was this whole campaign, that's this Save the Children thing. And that's a pretty long talk in general, but lawmakers have now decided that THC is killing children, and the ERs are just full of kids dying from THC intoxication, and that's what they're selling you in the media, which is complete bullshit. And we can go into what poison control and the CDC have given us.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So they were looking to impose some new regulations that were going to limit the milligram content per serving and per container of consumable hemp products.
Correct.
And the justification for these new regulations was this public health crisis where lawmakers are telling you about this explosion in childhood or hospitalizations of children who are overdosing on THC.
Right.
And so what did you hear from lawmakers about why they needed to restrict your businesses in terms of what you could sell?
Yeah, I mean, that was almost verbatim what they would say is, we've got to protect the kids. We got to save the kids. And so knowing this industry, I knew immediately there was bullshit afoot. So I said, okay, let's get actual figures. Because people can say what they want to say. They can sell you whatever they want to sell you. But let's get some documentation to back this up. So we actually were able to get these reports from the Iowa Poison Control that keeps track of this. And it detailed what that looked like. Because the number we kept seeing on the news was the hemp hospitalizations of THC. Actually, they didn't say hemp. They said THC intoxications on minors is up 1,090%.
Over what time frame?
Well, in the last year, they said. So in a year's time, it's up 1,090%. And these children are just, the ERs are full of children just dying from THC. So many of you know, if you subscribe to this podcast, that you can't die from THC.
That's right.
You can feel really shitty, but it'll pass. So we get the details.
And we certainly don't want to promote.
Obviously, don't let your kids just eat massive amounts of THC. We're not pro that, but if they ate a half a jar of aspirin versus a couple of THC gummies, let's just say you're safer in my field than you are in the other. So obviously, we have to be responsible parents, and we'll kind of circle back to that. But so this graph, it shows you in a year's time the number of hospitalizations of people under 18 in the state of Iowa. So the numbers are, it went from 6 reported incidents to 62 reported instances in the state, right? So when you look at the numbers in that way, you're like, oh, well, that's really not that bad. But it also goes into more detail. So it gives you the age groups of these 62 cases and what age they were. So one group is 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 18. So most people would think, oh, it's the 16 to 18-year-olds because they're the ones that are getting these vapes and this, which are illegal anyway. So, and shockingly, most of these cases were children under 5. So with that, that's a very aha moment for a lot of people.
Are you IDing these 5-year-old kids that are coming into your CBD store?
Oh, they look 21. They're fine. No, it's ridiculous, obviously. There's never been a 5-year-old that's walked into one of my stores, and probably any other retail store,
for sure. And
obviously. So immediately when I saw this graph, I know what it is, and most people immediately know what it is. It's parents who have THC, whether that be consumable hemp, medical marijuana from the state of Iowa, or recreational from another state. It doesn't specify where the THC came from. And God knows from my criminal case, they can't tell you anyway where the THC comes from. So we just happen to take all the hits because we're the ones in question. So this is simply parents who enjoy THC, had probably accidentally left a gummy or some type of product in a child's reach. The child eats it because they're, under 5, and the parent panics and takes the child to the hospital. And now it is a strike against us as retailers because their child has consumed THC. obviously, we don't need to get into the common sense here of how was a lack of parental supervision my fault
Absolutely.
as a retailer. It obviously is not. That's ridiculous. Imagine if you compared our 62 cases in the state to alcohol, to tobacco, to cleaning products. I mean, the list
Peanut
goes
butter.
on. Yeah. I mean, the list goes on and on. There has to be parental parameters here. I mean, why am I taking the hit as a retailer? But it was because it was easy. It was easy to say 6 to 62 is a big percentage, even though it's a small number. And that's how you were fed this in the media. And as much as we tried to fight it, we just don't have the funds, like a lot of places that are against what we're doing. And most of it is a lack of education, and it's still that way today. And it's disheartening when I've put so much effort into trying to educate your lawmakers and your police officers. I remember right before my arrest, I think it was 2 months before I got arrested, I had helped there was a compliance company that traveled around the United States to police forces to talk about the difference between hemp cannabis and marijuana cannabis, both identical. And I had spoken at this compliance meeting and was helping these police officers. And again, overwhelmingly supported by police. And still to this day, I'm pretty supported by the police. It's not them that has a problem. So I know I kind of went off on a sidebar here, but that's who I am as a person.
But as part of those new regulations, there is an ID restriction or an age restriction.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's really against.
No.
That's clearly the case with tobacco. It's the case
Right.
with alcohol, firearms, anything that would require an adult. I mean, I don't think that the industry itself was. You're probably IDing people at the point of purchase anyway, just to be safe.
Correct.
And so there's an ID restriction. Did the new regulations have like a child-proof container
It
requirement? or
actually
anything
didn't,
like that?
which was kind of surprising. Not a lot, but I can speak to mine and most retailers locally. We already have childproof packaging. That's just a responsible thing to do. I mean, your national retailers and even other brands, we don't want these products getting into the wrong hands. Although
sure.
they're safe, although they're not going to harm you, it's still something that has to be self-regulated. It needs to have testing. It has to go through, hey, is there any metal in this? Is there other elements besides just cannabis? That's anything that's consumable has to have a layer of protection. So we already had childproof containers, and a lot of brands did. So when these new laws were proposed, which was last year, right? So that's when things changed. So here in Iowa, July 1st is when things changed, and I'll go into what that was specifically. But when it was in the works and we were trying to negotiate, we had said, make it 18 or 21, make it 25 today. We don't care about that.
Like an emergency.
Yeah, we don't care about that. That was an
pronouncement.
oversight from you that wrote the hemp plan. We've done that anyway, but you can enforce that anytime you'd like. We don't care as retailers. So the problem is when this bill was presented to vote on in the House and in the Senate, a lot of the ugliness of this bill hid behind legal age. Lawmakers didn't want to vote against it only because of legal age being on that bill. So even though he said just change legal age, the other stuff is ridiculous. I mean, this criminalizes parents. This takes the milligrams. So to go back to what does it look like now? July, it passed. We lost that fight. That was very unfortunate, and if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, I can go over that. But so as of July 1st, there is now a restriction on THC. That being, you can't have more than 4 milligrams of THC per serving. So that's per gummy, per capsule, per tincture, oil, whatever. And 10 milligrams of THC per container. So this was a part of our federal issue we had with the state, because we said, well, what is a container? What are you considering a container? Is that a drink? Is that one container? Is it?
And just so people know, as a point of comparison, you would have products before the new law went into effect on your shelf. There would be a container that might have 30 gummies
Yeah, so our industry is a package for 30 days. So, it's no different than a lot of supplements. Vitamins are packaged for 30 days. Protein powders are packaged for probably 30 days or more. Tylenol's packaged for 30 days. I mean, it's very common in the manufacturer retail world to have a 30-day package. It's the standard of our industry.
And then in terms of like the milligrams per gummy,
Right.
what would be like like the typical range that you would be selling before the new regulations went into effect? How much product is in each gummy?
So if we're talking just THC, because we get confused on, well, what's CBN and CBD and how does that mix with THC, and the total milligrams per piece, is that just THC or is it all things? So it gets kind of gray. But if we're talking just THC, I would have anywhere from, gummies that had maybe half of 1 milligram of THC per piece to gummies that had up to 10 milligrams per piece. This is still considered a fairly low milligram in the eyes of THC content. So that's really what I want the audience to understand. Even a 10 milligram gummy, although it will have some psychoactivity, it's kind of per person dependent. So a lot of these lawmakers would say to me, well, what milligram is when intoxication starts? And I would say, how many beers does it take you to get drunk? It's going to be different from you to me. It's
right.
different for every person, and THC is the same. So where I am for having some type of safety cap, like synthetic THC or 100, 200 milligram per piece type of things, it can get ugly. And I've been on the side of, let's not go there. It doesn't become beneficial for your health really anymore at that point. So we would have, gummies that were up to 10 milligrams per piece, and that was normal. That was allowable. That was approved by Iowa. It's sale at all of our stores. That was the industry standard.
And from demand, like, because you're in this industry, do customers want low dose THC products? Would they gravitate toward the half a milligram THC as opposed to the 10 milligram THC?
We're all over the map, and it really depends on why someone is coming into the store in the first place. And that's why having a brick and mortar was always important to me, because you can't advise truthfully a product for somebody unless you know why they want the product. So if it's just for a fun Saturday night versus I can't sleep at night or I have crippling anxiety during the day, those three are totally different products. Those are different things. And you have to have an owner or a person that cares enough about you to say, not everyone needs a high milligram of THC. And that remains true today. But you do have people that have horrible pain where a higher milligram of THC through and through scientifically is proven to be helpful and more helpful than a low dose of THC or no THC. And this is pain management. Most of the customers, at least in my store, are over the age of 40, 50 years old. These aren't young kids coming in here to get high. It's too expensive at my stores anyway. We have high quality products. They are priced appropriately for that. They're not for kids to come in and get high. That's never been the purpose of the industry. So the reason these caps, because to the regular person that doesn't know much about this industry, it sounds good. It sounds, okay, well now the kids can't get these super high milligram gummies. So we said 10 milligrams really isn't that high, but let's just kind of circle back. So 30 milligram containers are what our industry standard is, like we said. So let's say I have my sleep gummies. So I have gummies at the store, very popular, and they're for sleep. We did a full human clinical. We're the only brand in the world that's done that, for the record. They only have a little over 1 milligram of THC in those gummies. They're predominantly CBN. And so, but...
Another cannabinoid.
Yeah, another cannabinoid that's helpful for sleep. So, but in a 30-count jar at 1.1 or 1.5 milligrams of THC, they're obviously over 10 milligrams. So even though there is no psychoactive, no high, no nothing, I can't sell them just because of how they're packaged. This is the same for like tincture oils. So oils are the things you put under your tongue. They're in a 30-day bottle as well. So let's say someone has a dose and it has 3 milligrams of THC a day. That's a low dose. That's an allowable dose. But because it's packaged for 30 days, the bottle has, 70 milligrams of THC. So this 10 milligrams per container doesn't make any sense in any way to have that restriction, because it almost makes it impossible for us to sell anything.
So now, I mean, if somebody wants to buy, because if you're limited to 4 milligrams in a serving and 10 per container, you're talking about selling customers multiple containers.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's just this cost for all of us. It's more cost for the consumer, it's more cost for me, it's more cost for everybody. And the irony is that all hemp-derived products are federally legal. This is your 100 milligram gummies, your inhalable THC. As long as they're derived from hemp and they're under 0.3% THC, they are federally allowable. Your U.S. postal system is controlled by the federal government. So what does that mean? It means people will order all these things on the internet. So who pays the price? Your local small businesses that pay taxes in the state of Iowa, who can't sell you a 1.5 milligram THC gummy because it's in a 30-day container, yet I'm the one paying for taxes in your children's fundraisers. So make it make sense.
No, you're right.
And they even acknowledged it when this bill was signed into law. Kim Reynolds had said, we know that there's going to be, internet purchases. There's nothing we can do about it. Like, how irresponsible is that from a state that relies so heavily on small businesses?
That's a great point, and I know that we've got some more to cover. We're gonna break this episode up into 2 pieces, and so we'll be right back on the straight and dope.